right, we will continue forward. So next we have developing my skills. So learning what skills you need to have in order to meet success and basically build your foundation. Thank you, Sam. Really excellent job. So now we have Hadi. Take it away. It's all yours.
Okay, great. So let's just quickly go through the skills that we can, let's say, develop. I think in the beginning of the webinar, we just went through the different roles that a person can have in the data department, a data scientist, data engineer. And yeah, depending on each role, there are different set of skills that you can focus on to develop them. But here I am just going to talk about the general ones, assuming that if you are hired by a club or federation, you will be involved in different roles. So you will not be only doing data scientist, but maybe you also be involved in the data engineering part and also presenting the results and communication with the coaching staff. So let's just go through them. So I have not prepared the presentation, but I will just go through the items one by one. And at some point I will share my screen. So I will go through the resources that you can use. So the first one is a programming language. So if you can just make sure that you are comfortable with one programming language, it can be Python or it can be R. We can just go through that discussion later on which one is better. Maybe at some point it becomes a bit subjective, but making sure that you have mastered one programming language is, I think, very important. Another skill is visualization, creating visualizations, proper visualizations. So the ones that are informative and clearly can communicate the message that you want and expect your end user to get from them. So the visualizations can be static or interactive, like in the dashboards. Another skill is database management. So maybe it really depends on the organization that you work and what they have in place currently, or if they don't have anything, what you want to set up for them. But anyway, it's going to be like a database, a data infrastructure, whether it's going to be on cloud or it's going to be something in the organization. There are different technologies that you, at that point, you need to focus on one. It can be MySQL, it can be PostgreSQL, or it can be just Google Cloud or Amazon Cloud that you use for your, let's say, role. Another skill is just making sure that you're familiar with APIs. So because data providers usually provide their event and tracking data through APIs, making sure that you are comfortable with that. Some of them also provide their data sets through Excel files or XML files or JSON files. So you are comfortable with different data formats. And maybe in the beginning of one's role in a federation or club, you can just work alone, independent of others. But as it develops and progresses, maybe you need to communicate and share your code base with others. That's why there is a need for version control systems such as Git, GitHub, or GitLab. So you just make sure you are comfortable with one of those version control systems and you can, let's say, work on them properly. And I think at this point, I will just share my screen. Okay. So there are different courses that, let me see if I can click. There are different courses that you can also take to make sure that you have the knowledge in data science connected with the knowledge in football. So for example, there is a course, the material is online, mathematical modeling of football, which is instructed in the Uppsala University. So we can share the links later on, that you can just go through them, and all the slides and the lectures are available on YouTube. So it can be a course that is focused on using data science in a football domain. Another, let's say, useful resource can be the Friends of Tracking YouTube channel. So basically the mathematical modeling course at Uppsala University is somehow, let's say, connected with this Friends of Tracking channel. And they have some of their lectures on this channel in the YouTube. But you can also go through all different videos that they have uploaded. A lot of them are very useful. Depending on the title, you can choose which one to watch, and depending on the skill that you want to expand your knowledge in that part. Another resource that I want to share with you is making sure that you are comfortable in communication with the coaching staff. I think one of the first things that you need to do is to make sure that you can talk in their language. So maybe if you follow, let's say, websites like Coach Voices, where coaches come and talk about how they want their players to play, how they do their, let's say, training sessions, you get used to their terminology, and then you can use the same terminology in the communication and messages that you want to present. So you make sure that you can talk in their language. And there is a very good resource compiled by Ed Webster on GitHub. So I will just go through that. I think it's going to be very useful for one who wants to expand and develop his skills. So there is a table of contents on this GitHub repository with different sections, and depending on which section is relevant for you, you can just focus on that. I will just quickly go through the most important ones. So the first one is data. So when you click on data, it's just going to list all different data sources and the ones that are publicly available that you can use to work in your personal projects or in your spare time to develop the skills that you are interested in. So here they have like event data and all the different data providers who have provided them in for free and public. Just probably it's not going to be the current season, it's maybe like the previous years or only specific competitions, but it's something that you can just take it for your own personal development and the skills that you want to work on. Then they have data sources for tracking data and all other different data sources that I'm not going to go through all of them, but you just bookmark this link and to come back later on. So if I just go back to the table of contents. Okay, so they have another section on the tutorials. So we talked about mastering one programming language. It can be Python, R. So depending on the one that you have chosen, you can just click on that, and then it will bring you to the resources that are relevant for the football domain. So, and you can use them for learning Python. Maybe if you want to start from scratch and you have not used Python before, maybe you need to check other resources first. And when you have maybe a basic understanding, then you can come back to these ones. Going back to the table of contents, here they have one section on the libraries. I'll just open here. So what happens a lot of time that when one works on something, maybe you are working on the one thing that has been done already. So if you just make sure that you have checked the current libraries and repositories, you can just use what has been built before and don't, let's say, somehow, let's say, waste your time. You can just build on top of what others have done. Here they have listed libraries in Python, for example, that you can take and use for your specific project. For example, here they have MPL Soccer. It's a library that is integrated with Matplotlib for visualizations. For example, if you want to just draw a pitch, you don't need to do it yourself. You can just take it, the methods, and call the functions from this library. And it's just going to be more efficient, and you can just quicker achieve what you want. So, and other libraries that here they have. So it's a long list. I don't want to go through all the items here. And what else here we can see? They have a section on notable figures and Twitter accounts. So I think it's important to know about the skills if you want to develop. It's not only technical skills, but it's also about networking and getting to know people in the community. So that's also like a software skill. So if you just click on this link, it's just going to show you all the people who are active in this community, whether they are on Twitter, or you can just find the same people on LinkedIn and get connected with them, and make sure that you are informed about the latest updates in the field and latest, let's say, innovations. And that's itself a skill that if you can just keep yourself updated with what's happening, I think it's very important. So here, for example, they have a list of people who are they have run a PageRank algorithm on them to see which ones are very influential and important in this field. So with their account names on Twitter, you can just follow them to make sure that you are involved, like say, in the community. Going back to then they have another section on events and conferences. That's also part of the software skill, that you just make sure that you know which conferences and events maybe happen each year, and the ones that you can attend for the networking, let's say, part to expand your network. That can be something interesting to me. I think before I close this part, I just want to make sure that you also go through the key concepts in the field. It happens a lot that one person comes up with an idea, but that idea was already being discussed and evaluated and established before, because he was or she was not aware of that. Maybe he or she thinks it's a very new idea. So just make sure that you go through the key concepts of the field, like expected goals or other KPIs, and make sure that you are comfortable with them. And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to, let's say, show for this part. And if that a club gets informed about what you have done, so, but I think the key is to follow the people who are active in this field. So from the GitHub repository, you have the list of people who are on Twitter or on LinkedIn. You follow them, you make sure that you have a clear description on your bio that you want to work in this field and you are going to publish stuff, so something like that. And maybe that makes them to follow you back. And then when you have, let's say, case study or a blog post that you want to just tweet it, then just, yeah, it's I think it's like selling. You want to just sell your blog post, so make sure that how you present it in the description, so people click on that and just go through the what you have written. And that's it. So if you just do something interesting, probably it's going to be retweeted and just go through the community, and a lot of people go through your work and read about that. But whether that ends up in someone or who is working for a club to read it, I think that's really depends on case. So I just want to make sure that I understood the question correctly. So because there are different roles in a club. So if you mean that you want to switch and become a data scientist and data engineer, or
So a bit more about Jack, because I know Jack personally actually, is he has a traditional coaching background, and he currently is working in California with youth clubs there in the Bay Area, if I remember correctly. Um, and essentially what I'm gathering from this question is, so if you're somebody who has a mathematical background, this is a route that you can take to get to becoming a data analyst, data scientist, sports scientist, whatever it may be. Now, if you don't have that mathematical background, you come from a different walk of life, do you have to take a different route in terms of self-educating yourself to get to that same end goal, or do we take a slightly different route?
Yeah, I think it's more or less the same path, but probably because if you or one doesn't have the same background, it's going to take longer. And so then that's I think the key to something to take into account, that maybe it's going to be a bit slower, so the speed that you have to learn different things, because you don't have the same background, and maybe there are some terminology, some words that are used there that you don't know their meaning, and then you just need to go through them, and maybe at some point it can be frustrating because there are a lot of words, and then you just need to just go and see what's the definition of each one. But the courses that we just recommended, the mathematical modeling for football, I think the level of math is like in high school. So if you have that level, and then you can just start with that course. Then for the programming is not really something about, I think, yeah, you need to know some parts about data structures and algorithms, but you can start learning without them. But anyway, compared to one who has a background, who has like a bachelor in computer science, it's going to be slower and taking more time.
Cool, perfect. All right, so we have one last quick question to read through the background here. Do we start from a coding language? We feel
okay. So I think, yeah, you should, because right now you are not working for a club, so it's not really about thinking that which club is using what, and then you adjust yourself with them. Just start with Python and R. I will say R. I will say Python. Probably Sam will say R. So it's going to be just a different opinion there.
I would also say Python, probably, because just yeah, it's just you can do more stuff with it. But yeah, we're in our shop for sure. But I would say Python.
And regarding the clubs, I think yeah, maybe some of them, they are just starting from zero, so they have not defined like any standard or anything on the programming language that they're going to use, and you are going to be maybe among the first ones who are going to go there and decide on the programming language and the data infrastructure, all this stuff. So I think you can just decide yourself, Python or R. We will say Python, but do your research and see, maybe you have a background in R, and maybe it's easier for you, or but
your StatsBomb research results were. What findings did you have, and kind of how did you get to that bit?
Okay, great. So I will also talk about the process. So it was last July that StatsBomb opened the call for abstracts, asking the researchers to submit their ideas, like in, I think, maximum 1 or 2 pages. And I think the next one will be just in July. So they have the next conference in October, and they will start again in July, asking for researchers to submit their ideas. And if you decide to, let's say, participate in this conference, maybe there are some tips that we can give you. Let's say the first one is that from now you can just start working on your idea, because you have the StatsBomb 360 data open source from Euro 2020, and they have also open sourced a lot of other data sets, event data from the other competitions. that you can just take them. Most probably you will get more or less similar data for the conference. You can right now use what you have, what is available online to develop your project and your idea. And it's very, I think, important to just do your research on the last year conferences, basically StatBomb ones, to see what has been presented there. And they have, let's say, uploaded their talks on YouTube, on their channel. You can just go through them and you will get a feeling of which topics are getting into the stage to be presented and what are their characteristics. And I think you can just watch them and then find what is maybe a possible limitation of what they have done, and maybe you can come up with an improvement. That can be your proposal. And let me just go through the list of items that I have prepared. You can also go through the papers that have been published before. You can just go through the Google Scholar, or just people who are well known in this field. You can just go through their publications and just read what they have done and see whether you can find a way to improve their work. And when you are submitting your abstract, think about the end user. Who is the end user, whether it's StatsBomb itself as a data provider, or it's like the coaches, or like the recruitment department. And really just focus on the application in your abstract. What is the application? So maybe you come up with something that is very interesting. It's very technical, but the side that you should talk about the application and explain it and make it clear for the reader or the judge who is going to say whether your abstract is accepted or not. Maybe that part can be less clear and maybe a bit vague, so that can be like a negative aspect of your abstract if you don't cover it in your submission. As Samer explained, maybe focus on areas that are not presented in the last years, like the goalkeepers or maybe defenders, or for example, in my case, my submission was about counterattacks, and when I had my first meetings with them developing on that idea, they told me that the reason that my submission was accepted was because of the subject. It was about counterattacks, so they didn't have something about counterattacks. Later on, I changed even the abstract and the subject, because I just found it that it's not feasible with the data that StatsBomb has provided me. So it's even this possibility that you can change it later on. But it seems that the way, maybe, or one of the factors that they decide which, let's say, idea to accept is the subject itself, and comparing it to the previous years, whether it's, let's say, it was represented enough in their events or not. And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to explain. So I didn't go through my own presentation because it's just on YouTube. You can just Google it, potential penetrative passes. The video is on the StatsBomb YouTube channel. So really there is no point to just go through that presentation again here. And it's like 30 minutes, so you can just watch the full talk on YouTube.